Hi folks, my name is Pat Healy from the Laker News. For those who might not know, the Laker News is an online news website covering the Fall River, Beaverbank, and East Hants area. You can find us at www.thelaker.ca. I will be your host and moderator tonight for our Sackville-Preston-Chezzetcook Federal Candidates Forum. That's a mouthful to say. Before we begin officially, I want to acknowledge that we are on unceded ancestral Mi'kmaq territory. The following Federal Candidates Forum, in partnership with the Fall River and Area Business Association and presented by the Nova Scotia Association of Realtors, is to provide residents a chance to ask pressing questions to our federal candidates from the four main parties running, looking for your support in the September 20th federal election. This live stream on the Laker News Facebook and on Dagley Media's YouTube is courtesy of our good friend Matt Dagley from Dagley Media in Lower Sack. Tonight, Jay Cameron is our timekeeper, and on sound, it's our friend Daniel McKenzie. I'd like to thank my friend Dr. Strang for the tie I'm wearing. Tonight's candidates forum would also not be possible without each of our four candidates that are here from the four main parties. The LWF Hall for the use of the facility. The Lions have great wings here on Thursday night, but also more importantly, the support of FRABA and the NSAR. Now, here in person to give us a little speech from FRABA is the president, Steve Mcclellan. Steve?
All right, thank you, Pat, and candidates. I am Steve Mcclellan, as Pat mentioned, the president of the Fall River and Area Business Association. And I'm here to welcome you, the viewer, and the candidates to the 2021 candidate forum for the big election coming up. Right? I'm excited, and I hope you are too. If you're watching this, the simplest and easiest thing you can do to make our community better, which I believe leads to making our country and the world even better, is simply go out and vote for the candidate that aligns the most with your vision, value, and goals. That's the simplest thing you can do. Bring a friend and get out there and vote. But I also challenge you to step it up a little, take it to the next level, and either become a leader like these leaders in your community or a contributing member. Now, for those that have taken the plunge or are thinking of starting their own business, as president of the Fall River and Area Business Association, I pledge to you to work with whatever candidate wins to ensure your voice is heard. And please come and join FRAPA. As you know, starting a business, it ain't all sunshine and rainbows, and it's best to surround yourself with like-minded people that want to help you succeed or even take your business to the next level. Now, to all the candidates running here today, hats off to you. You have my respect. You are the leaders. You are the ones that are taking the step up to make our community, our province, our country, and I would even say the world, a better place. I wish you nothing but the best, and I look forward to whoever wins, to working with you, and to making sure that the community is heard through the business associations and working to make sure that business owners can become more successful. Thank you, Pat. Thank you to the Laker News. All the best, and back to you.
Thanks, Steve. Now we're going to have a message from the Nova Scotia Association of Realtors, who are a presenting sponsor. Their message will play on video.
My name is Roger Bootler, the CEO for the Nova Scotia Association of Realtors, or NSAR. NSAR represents over 1,800 salespeople and brokers from across the province. Tonight we are very pleased to be taking part in this event. At this time I'd like to thank the Laker, the Fall River and Area Business Association, Dagley Media, and of course our candidates for being here with us tonight to take part in this debate. As you all know, housing has become a topic of interest during this federal election. We work with our elected officials to ensure that housing supply is adequate and that our communities are a great place to live for all Nova Scotians. Housing is a spectrum. Everything from community and social housing to long-term care, rentals, and new builds. We need to ensure that every part of the housing spectrum has an adequate supply. This means working with elected officials to increase the home buyers plan, ensuring that the federal government will work with the municipal and provincial governments to ensure that the housing issue is addressed in a timely manner. And we look forward to hearing from the candidates tonight on how they will address the issues facing the housing industry in Canada and in particular Nova Scotia. Again, I'd like to thank everyone for being here this evening. It's back over to you, Pat.
Thanks, Roger. Now let's introduce our candidates. Angela Conrad from the Conservative Party. Anthony Edmonds from the Green Party of Canada. Liberal Party candidate Daryl Sampson. And from the NDP, Jenna Chisholm. With those housekeeping duties out of the way, let's get our candidates forum underway. Up first with the introductions is Angela Conrad. So the mic is yours. Take it away.
Thank you, Pat. Appreciate this opportunity tonight. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you to FRABA as well for sponsoring, and the LWF Community Hall for hosting. They do have great wings. I love them. I'd like to thank my fellow candidates from all the parties. It's been great getting to know you along this trail, and thank you to the people of Sackville-Preston-Chezzetcook. I thank you for sharing your time and your perspective as I go door knocking throughout this election. Having moved to the riding in 1999, I know firsthand many of the issues that are impacting our residents. As a small business owner, a volunteer, and having raised my family in our community, I've experienced many of the issues faced by the constituents of Sackville-Preston-Chezzetcook. I want to ensure that your voice and perspectives are heard in Ottawa. I promise that if elected, I would remain a responsive and engaged MP who would be accessible to all the people of Sackville-Preston-Chezzetcook. Our recovery plan is focused on 5 pillars: securing jobs, accountability, mental health, as well as securing our future and our economy. We know that there are many other issues impacting the different communities across our riding, whether it's fisheries in Eastern Passage, or well-paying jobs in Fall River, or healthcare in Lower Sackville. Our plan will secure the future for all Nova Scotians. I want to once again thank the people watching for their willingness to share their perspectives and opinions with me. It would be an honor to represent you and your voices in Ottawa. Thank you.
Anthony.
Thanks, Pat. I'm going to start off telling everyone something that they probably very much know. In our democracy, we don't elect political parties, we elect MPs. Political parties aren't even mentioned a single time in our Constitution. Unfortunately, local races are too easily lost among the frenzy of elections. Not everybody watches candidate forums like these. So party platforms become convenient stand-ins for personal values. Let me turn this paradigm on its head for a moment, and I'll talk about some of the parts of the other parties' platforms that I personally do support. I support the Liberal plan for $10 a day daycare, as I supported a similar NDP plan in 2015 and this election. I like the Conservative proposal to double the Canada Workers' Benefit and pay it out quarterly via direct deposit. I see this as sort of a baby step toward a guaranteed livable income. I support the NDP plan to put a 1% cap on credit card merchant fees. That would help level the playing field between small business and commerce giants. I will absolutely support all of these things in Parliament. I will gladly vote alongside MPs who put these things forward, no matter what color their election signs are, because I know that that's what my friends and neighbors would want me to do. And opposing a good idea, just if it came from the wrong team, would be reckless, petty partisanship. I'm often asked why I don't choose to run for a more historically successful party. Well, the answer to that is something that you will not find in the platforms for those parties: a call for more cross-party collaboration and less partisanship. That's why I'm running for the Greens. Thank you.
Daryl.
Thank you and good evening. And I want to thank as well the organizers for tonight and FRABA and Pat yourself. This is very important opportunities for us to have some discussions. I've been your member of parliament for 6 years. I've had the experience of advocating on your behalf, and I've been dedicated to that advocacy for 6 years. But I have to tell you, I got into politics because of Dad. My father was a plumber, electrician from Cape Breton, who was a counselor, and he would say, my people need, my people want, my people deserve. And he said, I will fight for them. And that's exactly why I am involved in representing people. But I can tell you through COVID, times were tough. Organizations, individual, businesses were reaching out. They wanted, they needed, and they deserved that we would have their backs. And we did have their backs. For 69 days in a row, I talked with our Liberal colleagues across Canada, making sure we could tweak these programs to fit as many Canadians as possible, to be there for them. We called 7,000 homes, and I was on the radio, Seaside and Sackville, for since March 2020 till 2 weeks ago. My friends, I have to tell you, I've also been a strong advocate for veterans. Peter Stouffer did a great job, and I've tried to continue that, and I will continue fighting for our veterans. Thank you.
Jenna.
Gwe msitwen Deluisi Jenna Chisholm Delawain Mulin Sabu Basik Wijibuktuk. Hello everyone, I'm Jenna Chisholm, and I'm proud to be your NDP candidate in Sackville-Preston-Chezzetcook. I am a Mi'kmaq woman from Millbrook First Nation, but I have lived here in Middle Sackville my whole life. Thank you to everyone who's contributed to organizing this event, to Pat, to FRABA. We're so grateful, and also to my other candidates. It's super exciting to be here with all of you. I decided to run because as a young Indigenous woman, I've always longed for representation and for the promises to be fulfilled to the communities that I'm a part of. I work supporting Indian residential school survivors, helping them work through trauma and heal through our culture. I see the immense need for community supports, mental health services, and am reminded daily of the inequity that we still face every day in this country. I've spent the last few weeks knocking on doors and hearing from you, our community members. And on every single doorstep, our families are worried about jobs, the health of our loved ones, the climate crisis, and the public services that we all count on every day. The past 18 months have shown that Canadians can confront any challenge when we come together. And it has also shown us that the Liberal and Conservative governments have had many opportunities to make a better Canada, and they've chose not to. We can make life more affordable for everyday people by investing in healthcare, affordable housing, pharmacare, and childcare. We can build an economy that works better for more people. We will focus on rebuilding relationships with Indigenous peoples across the country who have been continuously wronged by our government. And I hope that today I have the opportunity to speak a little bit more on these issues. Thank you, Walaliek.
All right, let's begin. Round one. We'll begin with Daryl and then go to the left of him around making the answers. So the first question. The rate of women unemployed continues to be higher than men. The sector staffed primarily by women, including nonprofits and hospitality, continue to struggle. How will you and your party prioritize helping women and families recover from the economic and social impacts of COVID-19?
Thank you, Pat. That is such an important topic. And through COVID-19, we have experienced the challenges out there for many marginalized Canadians, but women especially. That's why we brought forward a women entrepreneur strategy to ensure that these individuals can, if they so choose to work outside their home and contribute directly to their communities, to their societies. It is extremely important. We are looking for more people to work. That's why we're bringing forward the $10 daycare program. That program will allow individuals, if they so choose, to go out in the workforce to do so. We have been talking about it for many, many years, but this Liberal government of Canada has already signed 7 provinces and 1 territory to this plan. This is not just a plan that's being thought about or consulted about. This plan is now in action, and we're going to make it happen very soon, as we did commit that we would do, and we are doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Jenna.
Yeah, so the Liberal Party has promised to make childcare more accessible since before I was born. So I'm 25 years old, and a lot of our women are still struggling to get back into the workforce, as we said, if they so choose. And we've had 6 years to have more affordable childcare, but there hasn't been any action. And we've seen so many of our community members and our women and our families struggling. My own sister, she had to open a day home because she couldn't afford to put her child in daycare and go back to work. And if she did go back to work, she wasn't making enough to pay for the childcare. So our women and our families deserve better. And we have to do more than just childcare, because not every woman is a mother. Not every woman is able to be a mother. And so there's a lot more that we need to do, and addressing sexual harassment in workplaces, in our Canadian forces, making sure that reproductive health care is accessible and safe for all, and creating those affordable childcare spaces so that our families can access them. There's so much that can be done, not just for the women in this community, but for the women across the country. Thank you.
Angela.
So there was a study done by Scotiabank prior to COVID. There was an employment gap between males and females that was 8%, or about 500,000 women. Through COVID, from February to October of 2020, 21,000 women left the workforce and 68,000 men joined the workforce. Childcare tends to be the basis of that. It may be sexist or stereotypical, but moms tend to stay home over dads. The Conservatives' plan for childcare will convert our childcare expense deduction into a refundable tax credit that covers up to 75% of the cost of childcare for lower income families. We also want to encourage job training to create opportunity in skilled trades labor for our workforce. My day job is at Hilti. I sell tools in the construction industry. Seeing the labor shortage there is incredible. And so having an opportunity to train women in this specific industry, I think, is very important. And then caring for aging parents. That's also a thing that tends to fall on the shoulders of women. We're putting forward Canada's Seniors Care Benefit that will pay $200 a month for seniors that are over 70, for parents, the people that are taking care of their parents. So these are some of the issues that we're going to cover in the Conservative Party for women.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anthony.
Thanks, Pat. First off, I just want to recognize that compared to the slate of candidates on offer in our district in 2019, we have a lot more gender diversity now. It's really great to actually be able to hear, women's perspective on women's issues, whereas last time we didn't have that luxury. So that's really awesome. So I'll be brief because I can't top that. I'm hearing a lot about childcare, and I think that's an important recognition that there are many forms of unpaid work that do disproportionately fall on women in our society. But then there are other forms as well. So Angela briefly mentioned seniors care, and that's something that also does fall disproportionately on women in our society. But there are a slew of other things. And I think rather than, trying to track those things down one by one, and I mean, subsidizing childcare definitely is a priority. It's a priority for the Greens as well. The question of whether it's through tax rebates or direct subsidies, I favor the latter, but definitely need to be doing that, just for the economic return alone. But I think ultimately we need to be recognizing as a society that we should be remunerating unpaid work. And I think ultimately the best way to do that is with a guaranteed livable income, in order to make sure that everyone has the means that they need to make ends meet, regardless of the type of contributions that they make to society, because not all contributions come with a paycheck, but they're all very meaningful. So I think there are a lot of ways we can approach this, but ultimately we should make sure that we're not picking and choosing and leaving people behind. We need to make sure that we have an inclusive and holistic solution. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I go, everything okay with the cameras? Okay, just looked like something was up. All right, question number 2. Daryl, why do you think it was important to have a federal election before the COVID-19 pandemic has ended?
Thank you, Pat, and I thank you for that question. It's a very important question. We're asking the Prime Minister often about it, and I think we have to be true to Canadians. During it from January to June, with COVID and all taking place, our government was trying to move forward on many bills that would support individuals, families, communities, organizations, businesses, and they were being held up 3-4 months. We were seeing amendments after amendments after amendments just to play the political game, which I understand political games are played, but not when it's crucial to help Canadians and to be there for Canadians. So filibustering all night long, trying to hold that debate so that we couldn't get legislation across. I have to be honest with you. We were elected in 2019 to govern. That is our responsibility. That's what we wanted to do. That's what we had to do. And we're here today because we're asking for a mandate to continue to govern. We're the government, the party that's in place now, with many, many supporting programs, housing, seniors, etc. And we need to be in Ottawa to get the job done and no political games. Thank you.
Jenna.
Yeah, so I definitely don't think now was an appropriate time to call an election. And I think that many of our constituents would agree. And I think that that's what I'm hearing on almost every single doorstep. Our constituents they're tired. They're exhausted. They've been through so much with COVID, having to deal with the housing prices, having to deal with the cost of just the overall cost of living. And there was so much that could have been done, that could have been fulfilled if we had continued on the path that we were on. And I think that Jagmeet Singh and the NDP have been doing what they can to work with the Liberal government to pass things that are important. So like raising CERB to $2,000 and making sure that they're working with them to pass things like that. But the time is not now. Our people, they needed help. They still need help. And I think that's why it's important to really take a look at where we are and where we deserve to be and make sure that we have a better future. Thank you.
Angela.
So I will agree with Jenna. I think I'm also hearing at the doors that this wasn't the time. I think, specifically in Nova Scotia, we just came off of a provincial election. I think that was called quickly because they knew this one was coming. The cost of an election alone is astronomical. And with the amount of spending that we've had to do through a pandemic, it doesn't seem an appropriate time to have an election. But here we are, and here I am. And if you're ready for change, then cast your vote. Thank you.
Anthony.
Well, so the question was, why did we need an election? But I'm hearing that there's not at all a consensus that, in fact, we did need an election. So I think I'm going to take the liberty of answering a slightly different question, which is, why are we in the middle of an election then? And I'm going to suggest that it's an artifact of our 19th century voting system that Queen Victoria signed into existence when she was about my age, about 30 years old, back when the telegraph was a new invention that hadn't really caught on yet. If we look at the recent provincial election, which we're all very tired from, we saw about a 2% swing in popular vote resulted in a massive, massive change in the balance of power within the provincial legislature. That's just too much temptation for politicians to resist, knowing that, hey, we're having a good month in the polls. Maybe we can call an election and go from a minority to a massive majority. Who wouldn't do that? But frankly, that doesn't serve the best interest of Canadians. What we really need is an electoral system that gives us a stable government, not one that can turn at the drop of a hat based on a very tiny, tiny swing in popular vote. Frankly, That's just not what Canadians want.
All right, question number 3 of round 1. Housing supply issues have a fairly significant impact on long-term housing affordability. What can the federal government do to help with housing supply issues across the country?
Thank you, Pat. Housing is extremely important. It's been important for a long time, but it's even more important today after COVID, seeing some of the challenges out there. We have brought, since 2019, the first home buyer incentive for young people. It's a shared equity with our government. We've brought the first ever national housing strategy. Affordable housing, we've been building them, investing the last 2 years, billions of dollars. Rapid housing right across this country. But there's more to be had, more to be done. And our government is very clear. We're bringing innovative, creative ways. Rent to own. Many of us have been hoping, wishing to see that someday, that you could contribute through your rent and get ownership, which is extremely important. We are also continuing a tax-free first home saving account, which you will be able to use for your home. The CMHC insurance that you pay way too much money, we're dropping it by 25%. And we're building a stream for veterans. Veterans will have their own stream for housing. And finally, the cooperative Lower Sackville homes. Back in the 70s and 80s, in Lower Sackville, we built thousands and thousands of homes through cooperative strategy, where the people would get together and help build that house, and the government, through CMHC, would lend them money. Thousands of homes were built right across this province, millions across this country in the 70s. We can do it. We will do it again. Thank you.
Jenna.
Too many people are struggling right now to make ends meet and to keep up with the raising prices of our housing and of our rent. And this issue is honestly it's extremely heartbreaking for me, because being on the doorsteps, I have seen so many issues firsthand. Last week, I had a young couple who both have great paying jobs. They have benefits, and they have 2 young children, and they had just bought a puppy in their backyard. And they were having a great time in their duplex, but the owner decided to upsell. And so they had less than a month to get out. So a family of 4 with a new puppy has less than a month to find a place to live. And right now that's not possible. We don't have anywhere to go. Under the government that we have right now, homes have increased by 55%. That's not okay. People can't afford that. People are having to make the choice between food and rent, between their medication and rent. So the NDP has a plan to invest right now and create 500,000 units of quality affordable housing to make sure that we're working with people to have rentals, cooperative housing, and social housing that is so desperately needed in our communities right now.
Thank you. Angela.
The Conservatives have committed to build 1 million homes in the next 3 years. We are one of the largest landowners in the country, and we want to hand 15% of our land and buildings over to the housing market. We also want to increase public transit where homes are being purchased. We have a plan to incentivize developers, which will defer their capital gains tax when they're selling a rental property. We also want to look at converting unused office space. We know COVID, there's a ton of unused office space out there. Potentially that could be turned into housing. And we have a for Indigenous, by Indigenous strategy that's been asked for by the Indigenous housing advocates. I think we have some really good plans as Conservatives to get this supply issue out of the way. Thank you.
Thank you. Anthony.
So housing is a massive problem right now, and I think it's sort of difficult to convey the extent to which this is a crisis. I think the anecdote that Jenna shared is really the more that becoming the rule than the exception. And I've heard many cases as well, very similar, where people who, in past years, in recent memory, ought to have been able to fairly easily afford a very nice home are struggling to do so. The problem that I see is the exploding prices. And this is driven by a few different things. Certainly the constrained supply is a problem. And I think, Daryl mentioned housing cooperatives. I think that's one of the right steps. And that's one of those beautiful areas where, the Green platform overlaps with the Liberal platform and even with the NDP platform to some extent. That we should be doing housing co-ops. We should be using the same model that we used in previous housing booms. We should be, leveraging the authority of crime corporations like this, the MHC. We should be doing all of these things, but we can't do it in half measures. We really need to go whole hog on this, because the people, to go in these houses are very much there. The demand is there. These houses won't go empty. We can't overbuild. So we really, really need to go all in on this. But at the same time, we need to address the flip side of the coin, which is that there's a speculative bubble, and housing prices are much higher than they really ought to be, even for the levels of supply and demand that are there. The way to do this is not to hand out money to people who are buying homes. It's not to give tax cuts to people who are selling their homes. All of these things make homes a more lucrative investment, but we really need to stop believing that houses are an investment, like a retirement investment. Houses are to live in. If you want to invest, put money in the stock market, do something else. Houses are not an investment. And we need to make that clear through government actions. We need to do things like clawing back some of the capital gains exemption on housing, maybe not retroactively if that's a problem, but going forward, things like this that we can do to make sure that housing stops being an attractive investment to speculators, so that speculators will instead look elsewhere for their investments. That's what we need to be doing, in addition to supply, which we do need to do.
Thank you. All right, on to round two, and we'll start with Jenna. What does reconciliation with Indigenous people in Canada look like to you? How will you ensure your government follows through with this, including respecting treaty rights?
I love that this was my first question, like totally at random. I love that so much. So as a Mi'kmaq woman, of course, reconciliation is something that's really important to me. And building those relationships is crucial. So before we're able to move forward on anything, we have to worry about rebuilding those relationships and rebuilding the trust between the government and First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people, because right now there is none. A lot of our people put faith in our government, and we have been continuously let down. And what we're asking for is not radical. We're asking for basic human rights. We're asking for the right to clean drinking water. That's not out of reach. It wouldn't be out of reach if we were living in a community. Like if someone in Sackville didn't have access to clean drinking water, they would get it. But because of who we are, where we come from, we aren't able to access that, and that's not okay. The TRC recommendations, Jagmeet and the NDP will work hard on implementing the TRC recommendations and the MMIWG2S. Those need to be implemented. We've only reached 12 out of 94 of the recommendations. And so that's a huge commitment that the NDP is willing to make with our Indigenous peoples, and upholding treaty rights is at the forefront of that.
Angela.
So it's lovely to sit here across from Jenna, and I have all the same notes about treaty rights and reconciliations, because it's really, it makes sense as a people that we work together. We want to be nation to nation partners. We want to resolve long-standing challenges. Drinking water, absolutely, it's a human right. Why are we struggling with people in our country having clean drinking water? We need to build prosperity through partnerships, working with Indigenous-led organizations. The Conservatives have committed to $1 billion over 5 years in the mental health industry for Indigenous mental health and drug treatment programs. We want to put time and effort together, and we want to work. It's crucial. It's crucial. Our efforts need to work together with these people, and because you're our people. We're all Canadians, and we need to make this reconciliation work. Thank you.
Anthony.
Yeah, so I think it's funny, you know, we're often talking about implementing the recommendations of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and those 94 recommendations, you know, as though that's some lofty goal. But I mean, really, arguably, that's sort of like the baseline. Like that's the minimum we need to do. We need to get there, and then we can think about what we do from there. But really, like that's the ground floor. I think really to understand the treaty relationship, we need to sort of unpack some of the platitudes that we often spout, maybe without thinking about them. Like when we say, you know, we're on the unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people, you know, what does that really mean? It doesn't just mean, hey, this thing happened once in history. It means that relationship, the treaties that you know form that relationship, that legitimize the presence of sort of Canada as a whole, they're ongoing. They still exist today. The treaty, you know, the land wasn't ceded, but we're still bound by that treaty. And when I say we, I mean, you know, again, another platitude. We say we're all treaty people. What does it mean we're all treaty people? Well, it's easy to think of these treaties as being something sort of that, you know, the government of Indigenous peoples and the government of the colonizers signed, and then that happened, and it's all, you know, forget about it. It's in the past. But of course, it's not something between the government and you know, the Indigenous peoples. If you're a Canadian citizen, if you're a subject of Canada, you're arguably sort of a signatory to that treaty. And that means that it's something that we're all sort of not just collectively, but individually responsible for. That doesn't mean you should go rush home right now and do something to implement one of the 94 recommendations. But like I said, it does mean that that's sort of the bare minimum, that we really need to be doing those things and actually holding up, you know, our end of the bargain after so many years. Again, we're dating back to when Queen Victoria was baby-faced, and we're sort of still, or I guess just now getting around to like maybe holding up both ends of the treaty. You know, we could do better, right? Thank you.
Thanks. Daryl.
Thank you. Reconciliation is crucial. Our government has started in 2015, and we continue on that path. Building relationship is crucial, and that has been one of our top priorities since 2015, and we continue to do that. I always say, I ask myself the question, does an Indigenous child have the same opportunities of my kids, of our kids? That is the basis to where we need to make sure that we're doing the right thing. That is why we, of course, adopted the United Nations Declaration, Rights of Indigenous Peoples. But we're investing in these communities. We're investing in infrastructure. We're investing in education. We're investing in healthcare, in childcare, in their culture, in their language. We want them to be able to speak their language and to learn their language and be part of that very important movement. We're investing in mental health and wellness strategies for Indigenous peoples. We have cleared 101 out of 160 boiling water advisories. Those that are left are a little more complicated, but we're at task. We will get it done. That is our commitment. And we are in the process of building 3,300 spaces for childcare as well. It's been a priority. It continues to be a priority, and it will be a priority as we move forward after this election. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is, what investments will be made to enhance and allow Canada to attain its climate 2030 targets? How will you ensure Canadians are prepared to face the potential negative effects of the climate crisis?
So the climate crisis is putting everything that we value at risk. And as a young person, I think it's extremely important to talk about basically just how terrifying it is to be living. You can, as soon as you step outside, you can feel the climate crisis. This entire summer we have had has been filled with extreme weather, extreme highs, extreme lows, lots of rain that we're not used to. We're seeing more storms than usual. And we're still seeing people denying climate crisis when we can feel it every day. And this is something that we're seeing on the doorsteps. People are so scared. Young people are terrified. So the NDP's plan is to cut emissions by more than half and to meet the 1.5 degree target that is necessary to prevent catastrophe. And while doing that, we will create hundreds of thousands of good paying jobs when we invest in clean energy, energy efficient and affordable homes, electric transit, zero emissions vehicles, and retrofit buildings across the country. So it's important to look at where we are and look at the future. A lot of people aren't thinking about it because they said a lot of people on the doorstep say, oh, well, I don't have to worry about it, but you do. And so that's why, as a young person, I'm standing behind the NDP and as a Mi'kmaq woman to protect our land, our water, and our Mother Earth.
Thank you.
So climate change is a thing. Everybody has this view. I feel like the Conservatives don't think that it's a thing. We do. We have a whole policy about it. It's in there. The 2030 goal, we want to have 30% of light duty vehicles be zero emissions that are being sold. We want more renewable natural gas, 15% downstream consumption to be renewable by 2030. We're planning on a personal low carbon savings account. This allows for monies taken from carbon purchasing and putting it in the hands of the people, not the hands of the government. So as you've seen it many times in governments of past, things get taxed for a reason, and then the government uses that to pay those taxes until that's done. And then, well, we're just going to keep that tax and now we're going to put that money into something else. By putting these savings accounts together, it will put the money in your pocket to be able to buy a transit pass, a bicycle, an electric vehicle, an efficient furnace, many things that will be beneficial to our country and allow us to have these goals met by 2030. Thank you.
Thanks. Anthony.
So this is sort of two big questions. It was about emissions, but also adaptation. I'm going to set aside the adaptation and talk about emissions. I think there's really a two-pronged approach to take. The first is providing the right incentives. If we put incentives in place, then we can let the free market sort of work its magic. And economists around the world have been saying for years, for decades now, that to solve this sort of problem, the best thing you can do is internalize the externality by putting a price on carbon, and a meaningful, significant price that truly reflects the societal impact of carbon emissions over time. We can allow the free market to, like I said, work its magic, force that invisible hand, and we'll see people adapting in ways that government programs wouldn't have been able to anticipate. The government, the apparatus of government moves too slowly to do the bulk of the sort of societal change that we need. But the second prong is where there are gaps in that, because there are certain things that private industry simply can't do. It doesn't have the clout, it doesn't have the size. Joseph Stiglitz has written about this extensively. There are actually cases where governments are best suited to do things. And some of those cases, most prominently, are things like large infrastructure. So for example, part of the Green Plan is a massive investment in a national energy corridor. By putting, high tension power lines connecting all of the provinces, we can share our renewables back and forth, thereby averaging out the gaps in intermittency between sources in different provinces and allow much, much higher levels of renewable penetration than we could otherwise achieve. That's simply not going to happen from only private investment. But with the right carbon price incentive and with the right infrastructure funding from the federal government, we can do this in a transformative way that will not only allow us to meet our carbon goals, but also reduce energy costs. In fact, it's the sort of thing that could put Canada on the right foot into the next sort of wave of green economy, the next wave of the Industrial Revolution, so that we can be massive exporters of things like aluminum and steel. Thank you.
Thanks. Daryl.
Well, climate change is real. Yet, only this year, one of the federal parties, 54% of the delegates, does not recognize climate change. 54% of the National Party, the delegates said clearly they did not recognize climate change. Climate change is not free. There's a price to pollute. We as a government has legislated so it doesn't matter if it's the Liberal or what government's in power. We have legislated net zero emission by 2050. And that means that everyone will have to follow those targets, meet those targets, and get the job done. We are reducing emissions by 40 to 45% by 2030. That's only 9 years from now. Half the cars will be zero emissions by 2030. We've put forward a very strong plan for retrofit to support individuals and families. Green jobs. We banned, of course, single-use plastic. And we have a very, very strong plan, 25% preserving our land and 25% our ocean by 2025 and 30% for both by 2030. Thank you.
All right, the third question of round two. Bear with me as I try to read this because it's not worded right on the paper. Nova Scotia has embraced trade with China, especially the export of seafood. Do you believe the economic benefits justify supporting a government with their history of human rights abuse?
So when it comes to trade, the NDP want to make sure that we're fair, respect human rights, protect the environment, and put the interests of Canadian workers and communities first. So that's why we always defend our workers in trade negotiations, protect the supply management, and stand up against any of those unfair tariffs and make sure that we're protecting the human rights of those involved with trade. And we need to make sure that we're improving the transparency of our trade negotiations and throughout the entire system and making sure that we're protecting those human rights of people. A new Democratic government will directly engage with Canadians and looking at the benefits and also the dangers of what some of those trade agreements might consist of and making sure that we're upholding the rights of our peoples regardless of who they are, and like Indigenous peoples or Canadians, and making sure that we're upholding those human rights here and where we're making our trades.
Thank you. Angela.
Yes, so the Conservative government would like to rebalance our trade priorities away from countries like China because of those human rights issues and toward the Indo-Pacific and African spaces. We want to create jobs through expanding trades with free nations. We want to pursue a Canada, Australia, New Zealand, United Kingdom agreement and build deeper ties with India as a part of that Indo-Pacific strategy. Human rights are important. They're important here as well as in the countries that we're dealing with. We want to make sure that we're upholding those values not only at home, but with the countries that we're trading with. Thank you.
Anthony.
I think the answer to, complicated questions of international trade where we see something happening that doesn't fit with us morally is not to back away from trade, but to pursue better trade. And I hear that there's a little bit of consensus on this, that what we really need to be doing is amping up trade with our international partners who already have a good record of, environmental and labor practices. The Trans-Pacific Partnership at one point was being negotiated as sort of a counterweight to China's influence in the Pacific region. But ironically, despite the protestations of people like in the Green Party of Canada, the way that turned out is that many of the provisos in it that would have ensured protections on the environment and on labor were largely gutted, and that made it a much less effective tool at using trade as a tool for ensuring human rights were being respected around the world and the environment was being respected. With that said, I think the answer to the question of China, if we really want to sort of flex our trade muscle on the small scale that we can and try to pressure them to improve their human rights record, to improve their environmental record, is probably not to stop selling them lobster, because China's made great efforts to maintain a positive balance of trade. They've been depreciating their currency. They've been doing all sorts of things. What they're really concerned about is maintaining their export market. One of the biggest export markets that's been very sort of notable in this sort of trade war that's been happening around China is, I just mentioned, aluminum and steel. If we can produce aluminum and steel inexpensively in Canada and in a green way, combined with carbon border offsets to ensure that we're not importing these finished goods from places that have, you know, very carbon intensive or otherwise environmentally harmful practices, then we can ensure both that we revitalize domestic industries, but also maintain vibrant trade with our partners who have good records on these things. And that's really the approach to take, is to make sure that we're not buying, you know, we're not buying blood diamonds, we're not buying dirty steel, we're not buying products around the world that are bad.
Thank you. And time's up. Now, Daryl.
Thank you. Trade deals are extremely important. Our government signed 14 trade deals since 2015, and we've used that to influence the different companies, the different countries, by ensuring that these trade deals had strong human rights protection, making sure they were aligned with our environment and continue to influence the importance of the environment, ensuring that the trade deals respected women in the trade, labor, ensuring that these very important components of trade deals are in place. But I have to tell you, in the 14 trade deals, the one that was very interesting was the U.S. Mexican, where Trump kept tweeting at 3 o'clock in the morning, "I won't sign a deal unless supply management is out," and we didn't put it out. He said, "I will not sign an agreement unless a sunset clause is in. In 5 years, it's out." We didn't sign that. He said, "I won't sign one unless the tribunal is American," and we didn't. We have been strong in trade deals. We will continue to be strong. We've ensured that our trade deals with China respected the components which are crucial, and it's a balance. We need to find ways of ensuring that we're influencing democracy and what's important to Canadians around the world. Thank you.
And we're on to round 3 and halfway through, folks. So doing good. Let's just keep going. All right, Angela. Canadians seem divided more than ever, with middle upper class Canadians faring well through the pandemic, while newer Canadians, visible minorities, and less educated workers bore the brunt of the fallout. What would your government do to close the gap in inequality and inequity?
That's an excellent question, Pat. I think the Conservative government really values the middle class, values the small business. We're interested in giving tax breaks. We're interested in finding ways for people to move forward in our economy. We're focused on getting these jobs back. We're focused on those million jobs that were lost. How can we get those million jobs put back in place in the next 12 months? There is quite a broad gap of people between that lower income and the upper echelon. We want to get people back to work. We have people right now sitting at home and getting paid. We want to encourage people to get back to work. If they're not interested in getting back to work because their pay is going to be too small, we have a program to put in place to top them up. So if you have a job that's under $28,000 a year, we'll bump that up for you so that the government is putting some money into the pockets of the people, but not putting all of the money into the pockets of the people. We have to move forward with our economy, get people back into the workplace, being productive people in our society, spending, purchasing, working. Thank you.
Thank you. Anthony.
Well, Pat, you know, I think what we've seen during the pandemic in terms of sort of the hollowing out of the middle class and working class, I think is really just, if anything, it's an acceleration of a trend that we've been seeing arguably since the 1970s, where the wages of working people, you know, middle class or low income, what have you, people who do honest employment, who do a day's work and who earn a paycheck, has been incredibly stagnant in the face of the spiraling wealth of an ever smaller number of people. Not to invoke sort of cliche images, but if we think back to things like the Occupy Wall Street movement and what they were upset about, this is the same thing. That never went away. That problem never got solved, and it's only gotten worse, and it's gotten incredibly worse during the pandemic. I think what we really need to do as a society is sort of reframe the social contract, have a bit of a hard reset on what we consider to be an acceptable amount of inequality, and then put in some hard measures to make sure that we don't go beyond that. So there are a number of measures in the Green Platform. This is actually one of the biggest sort of themes of the Green Platform, is how we can address spiraling inequality, and it's an issue that I'm direly passionate about. But just to name some things quickly: a financial transaction tax, a guaranteed livable income, wealth taxes. The list is incredibly long, but the point is we really need to think long and hard about what our priorities are as a society and what amount of wealth inequality we consider to be acceptable. Because if you look at the numbers, they are utterly staggering. Thank you.
Daryl.
Thank you. Inequality is extremely important for Canadians, and we've seen it even more through COVID. The marginalized Canadians, Black entrepreneurs, Black individuals, African Nova Scotian, women entrepreneurs. We've seen some challenges out there. We need to do more. We also, as a government, created the Atlantic Canadian immigration policy. First time ever in Canada that we had a region that had a strategy to bring more immigrants to Canada and to set them up so that they could contribute directly to society. We've put a plan in place where entrepreneurs, businesses can identify their needs where there's no workforce here in Canada, and we can bring them in here. These companies have already put those plans together. It's happening. But on top of all that, we need to make sure that we have the supports in place. Childcare is important for everyone. Education, healthcare, etc. Those are the type of strategies that we've been putting in place in the last 6 years, and we will continue to do that. Thank you.
Jenna.
People are working harder than ever to make ends meet right now. And as I think all three of you guys have mentioned, that COVID has shown us even more how inequitable our wages are. And it's so important because the working people, the people in our constituency, have struggled and are still currently struggling, while the rich are just getting richer. So the NDP will look at living wages, implementing pharmacare and dental care, which will help relieve the financial stress that a lot of our seniors and other constituents are feeling, and looking at wage equity, so making sure that our wage gaps are closed, and ensuring that the ultra-rich corporations pay their fair share so that the everyday Canadian and our working people get the services that they need and deserve.
Thank you. All right, Angela, the second question for you. Our community of Sackville-Preston-Chezzetcook is home to hundreds of veterans, especially in the Shearwater and Eastern Passage area. What will your party do to support them?
So I think it's very important that we have that sacred trust between Canadians and the brave soldiers, sailors, aircrew, who put service before themselves. Our leader is a veteran himself. He was in the military for 12 years. There's no question that we will have the veterans at the top of our minds in how we're taking care of them. They deserve mental health care. They deserve regular health care. We want to ensure that there are systems put in place that work together. Currently, we have two systems for our veterans. We want to streamline that so that a military person gets paid, and as they retire, they stay in the same system. So rather than switching from one system to another system, they don't talk to each other. It becomes very difficult to get information from one to the other. Let's streamline that, keep things moving forward, and make sure they're taken care of, as well as their families, spouses and children who have lost their loved ones because they've served our country. We definitely have plans in place to support them and keep them very top of mind. Thank you.
Well, this is one of those things where I think we'll find that all four of us are going to say that we do need to support our veterans. I don't think you're going to find anyone in politics who says, you know what, veterans not so important. So I think the question is not whether we should or even necessarily how we should, but that we need to really are we willing to make the commitment? Because it's going to cost money. It's not going to be cheap. We will need to sink funds in this, and we're going to need to to hire people to work at Veterans Affairs. We're going to need to make sure, because there's a massive backlog of people who need. I remember in 2019, Matt Mcclellan was the candidate for the NDP, and he was incredibly passionate about this issue. He spoke about it at great length. And of course, he was following in the footsteps of Peter Stouffer, who was a fantastic NDP MP, and I worked on some of his campaigns. It's a confession, I used to be an NDPer. And I think this is one of those things where we really do need to reach across the aisle. We need to be collaborative. We need to be post-partisan, all the things I've been saying. So, I mean, if I'm elected, one of the first calls I'll make will be to Matt Mcclellan and probably then to Peter Stouffer to bring them in on this, to put our heads together and figure out all the little things we can do, because that's going to be, I foresee that to be a major component of the constituency work for our next MP. And I think that's the sort of thing where not only can we, do we need to be making the right promises or whatever, but we need to have a willingness, each of us, to roll up our sleeves if we're elected and get down and dirty and do a lot of this work ourselves. And that's something that I'm definitely willing to do. And I think, needs to be done. Thank you.
Thank you. Daryl.
Thank you, Pat. Extremely important. This riding of Sackville-Preston-Chezzetcook has the most veterans and active members in the country per capita. That is why the day after I was elected, I spent time with Peter Stouffer, and I still speak with him often about how we can do more to support our veterans. But let me tell you the first thing we did in 2015 after being elected. We reopened the 9 offices that were closed. We rehired the 700 front staff workers that had been fired. We increased the disability pension, or at the time was a lump sum. We created the option between a lump sum and a disability pension. We've created the education and training program. 6 years in the military, $40,000 to go back to university or community college. 12 years, $80,000. The well-being fund for various groups to support veterans. The emergency fund. For example, the other day, there was the shelters in Halifax being knocked down. We identified a veteran. Vets Canada was there. We helped them, got groceries. We got them supported right away. We have created, of course, as I said earlier, the Veterans Rapid Housing Stream just for them. And the rent supplement and the wage wraparound services for veterans that we've created, and the first pilot in London, Ontario this year. We have been there. I will be there to continue to advocate on behalf of our men and women who served and who are serving today. Thank you.
Thank you. Jenna.
So I think running as the NDP candidate in Sackville-Preston-Chezzetcook, I'm more than aware of how amazing Peter has been with our veterans and with our community as a whole. And I knew that was going to be a crucial piece of this riding and who our people are here. And I actually, so 10 years ago, I was a co-op student for one of our local NDP MLAs. So I actually have done quite a bit of work with Peter and with a lot of our local NDP leadership as well. And it's crucial that we honor the service that our veterans have given our communities and our country. And we need to offer them the absolute best care and support possible when they come home. And there's so many different things that we can do. And one of the major things is making sure that the veterans don't come home and have to fight for their own benefits. Right now, there's only one caseworker for every 25 veterans. That's not enough. Our veterans deserve better. We can also help with easing the transition. So making sure that going from a service to a veteran, they have supports. They are able to get mental health supports, healthcare supports before they're released from service, and making sure that we're addressing sexual assault in the military for many of our women who have been affected by this profusely. Many of my volunteers are veterans, and that's why I've decided to spend so much time with the people in Eastern Passage, because it's such a distinct group of people, and our veterans need and deserve better representation.
All right, the third question for Angela. Would your government implement a national housing roundtable with all levels of governments to address the housing challenges facing Canadians?
I believe that we would. That's not in my policy book. That's not in my plan. But I know that the Conservative government stands for the people of the country. And if we need to put a roundtable together to discuss housing issues, because it is a crisis that we're facing right now in our country, I believe that our leader would 100% do that. Thank you.
Yeah, Pat, you know what? That actually is more or less straight out of the Green platform. And in fact, I think this is one of those issues that often come up where the crux of the problem is probably that levels of government are passing the buck, and none of them can really decide who is ultimately responsible. And so it gets, the can gets kicked down the road, to mix my metaphors. I think on the one hand, it's clear that a lot of the supply issues could be well addressed at the municipal level, but the incentives aren't in place for municipalities to do that. Here in the Halifax municipality, it's become very clear that Halifax councillors really, really want the municipality to be more involved in housing, but they're not getting the mandate to do that from the province. Now, the province in Nova Scotia especially is incredibly cash strapped. To make the sort of, once in a generation transformational investments that we talked about earlier when we were talking about housing, that's really got to be driven by the federal level, which is going to mean federal funding, but through provinces whose nominal responsibility it is to do housing, to municipalities who can then actually have the organizational capacity to administer these programs. The only way I can see that happening is with a roundtable or some other means of making sure that all three levels of government get on the same page, because we absolutely need to make this happen. And I think the federal government is in the best position of those three levels of government to really make it happen, because they're the ones who can actually, put up the money, who can put their money where their mouth is and make it worthwhile for the provinces and municipalities to get on board with this. Yeah.
Thank you. Daryl.
Thank you very much. And housing, as I said earlier, is crucial. I hear it at the doors. We need to do more. Our government is the first government ever to do a national strategy for housing. We put billions of dollars with lots of strategies in place. We consulted with Canadians. A roundtable is the least we should be doing. We should definitely need a roundtable as quickly as possible. But we've already had some. More to be had. And I agree with my colleague that municipal governments need to get more involved. Provincial governments need to we're all in it together here. We have no choice. And the federal government has been working very closely on many fronts with the municipal and provincial governments to make these type of major crises work for all Canadians. We, as I shared earlier, the many plans that we're talking about now, let it be cooperative homes, which we did right across the country, having CMAC playing a bigger role. But there's no question, the municipal government is on the ground. We need to invest through them and into housing, and we will do that as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Daryl. No.
Housing is a human right, and it's something that every single person deserves access to. Safe, affordable housing. That is a human right. And I think in order to reach that, we do have to work with all levels of government. However, we're leaving out Indigenous governments, which is not okay. And there are more than 3 levels of government, because we also have our Indigenous governments that we need to think of as well. And our communities are deeply affected by the housing crisis as well. So I think that there needs to be more than just the 3 levels of government at these tables. And we need to make sure that we're working together for a better, safer place for our community members to call home. And at the end of the day, we need to put our community members before our parties, before our levels of government, and we have to stop passing the buck, like Anthony said. And we all need to face housing right here, right now. And we need to work together to make that happen.
Thank you. Okay, now on to round 4, and Anthony Edmonds gets to start. All right, with COVID-19 forcing people to work from home and now continuing to do so even part-time, how will you, if your government is elected, support internet to rural Nova Scotia?
Okay, yeah. This is one of those transformational infrastructure things. Really, I think as part of, so we're actually, it's a really great sort of pivotal, almost opportunity. It's one of those that the challenge becomes the opportunity situations where on the tail of COVID, we're seeing unprecedented levels of people working from home, which has many benefits that we needn't get into. But it's good for the environment. It's good for people's mental health sometimes if they have the flexibility to do it, or it can be bad. But because we're seeing massive numbers of people doing this, we're seeing people are coming to Nova Scotia to enjoy the beautiful scenery, the wonderful people, moving from provinces where previously they needed to live to be close to their work. Now they have the opportunity to come out here. So investing in rural internet can open up economic opportunities for rural Nova Scotia in a way that's never really been possible before. So this is the sort of thing that can actually pay massive economic dividends in the long run. Therefore, I think it's incumbent on the federal government to pony up some funding for this, to make it part of any stimulus infrastructure package that comes out of the economic recovery plan from the pandemic, in order to ensure that that not only are we cost effective with this recovery stimulus, but it can actually help to improve the equitability of it, because we're providing jobs in rural areas potentially, and we're allowing a more sort of vibrant and inclusive society, because internet is very much becoming a necessity in our connected world. Yeah.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Daryl.
Thank you. Internet communication is crucial. We have I noticed now for a long time that we need to connect every Canadian so that we can choose to work from our communities. Many of our rural communities cannot prosper. The business community cannot prosper in rural communities without good internet. That's why our government has been investing the last 4 years directly into provinces and territories to ensure that we have connectivity, and good connectivity, because we have some internet in certain places, but it's not effective. We are working here in Nova Scotia with Development Nova Scotia. They are working with the various companies to make sure that the connectivity across this province becomes 100% as soon as possible. With COVID, we've seen the urgency even more, and it is crucial. Let it be just for school and education, kids having access. Through COVID, kids were trying to work from home and didn't have access to internet. That's unacceptable. We need to do it, and we need to do it as soon as possible. That's why I said we've invested the money. We're working closely with the different parties meaning, of course, Development Nova Scotia, the different companies that can bring internet to local regions right across the province. Thank you.
Jenna.
So as Anthony mentioned, Wi-Fi and access to internet has really become a necessity, especially over COVID. As Daryl said, a lot of our students have been working from home and haven't had access to internet, but also the important social aspect that you miss out on when you're not at school and when you're not interacting with those in your community. And so the NDP wants to create a corporation to offer an alternative to the large telecoms companies that are profiting off of Canadians right now. And we want to make sure that life is more affordable for our Canadians while still giving them access to Wi-Fi and internet. So it's important to make sure that we're getting this all across the country and that it's reaching our rural communities, our Indigenous communities, and the other communities that have been consistently left out, like Preston. Those are the communities that need and deserve so much better, but we can give Wi-Fi, we can give internet, we can give clean drinking water, like these things are not so radical. And so our communities deserve that access to be able to participate and interact with the other people that live here.
Thank you. Angela.
Yeah, so the Conservatives have committed to building digital infrastructure and offering high-speed internet to everyone in Canada by 2025. That is a 4-year plan. It might seem like a long time, but putting infrastructure in place to get to all of those homes is going to take time. It's going to take effort, labor. We're also planning on appointing a Minister of Rural Affairs so that we can tackle problems like this. It's not just high-speed internet. We have issues in rural space about crime, people that are out, not easily accessible by other people. We've found that they tend to be targeted, and so we want to hit the crime issue in that space as well. Thank you.
Next question for Anthony. How will your government increase their support for the Rapid Housing Initiative and bring forth less restrictive criteria with respect to timelines and support cost overruns?
To the Rapid Housing Initiative specifically?
Yep.
Okay, so I think this is one of those things where we're sort of echoing ourselves, harking back to talking about the involvement of municipalities in housing initiatives. The organizational capacity at those local levels really is much better suited to organizing those sorts of things. And so I think it's important to partner with local levels of government, with municipalities, with First Nations, in order to make sure that programs like that can be administered in the most efficient possible way to avoid cost overruns. But at the same time, to make sure that they're well funded so that all of the capacity is available to provide the necessary housing. Yeah, thank you.
Daryl.
Thank you. Our plan of rapid housing has been very effective in the last year and a half, but we need to be even more aggressive, as we have seen. But there's all kinds of opportunities out there. How many buildings are empty that can be refitted, transferred into senior housing, affordable housing? There's in every community you look around you, and there are available buildings. I know one up in Chezzetcook. They've been building it about 15 years ago. It's left there. It's worth millions of dollars. We need to go in there ASAP and build those. That is one excellent way of doing it. And also for housing, let's look at the multi-generational tax credit that our government is giving, where we can have our parents or grandparents stay in our house and have access to some funding, a tax credit, so that we can house more of our seniors and families. That's how we can work together. Our grandparents and great-grandparents can help if they're involved in our family. If they're closer, they can help babysitting so that we can get out to more people to work. There are many ways of doing it, but we have to work together. The roundtable is a minimum. Tomorrow morning, let's do it.
Thank you. Jenna.
Yeah, so only a third of Canadians can afford to buy any type of house right now. So, and like Anthony said, we're kind of echoing what we said before, but it's absolutely important. And so we want to create opportunities for nonprofits to access funds and build housing as well, so that it's not just the government that is building these cooperative homes and these social housing opportunities. So a great example would be our friendship centers. So our friendship centers are urban hubs for our Indigenous peoples, which I'm sure most of you guys are aware of, and that's where I've grown up. The Friendship Center was kind of my off reserve. And so the plan that the NDP has will give opportunities to facilities and for nonprofits to create affordable housing units for their clients that are already there.
Angela.
Yeah, so I'm going to kind of jump on Anthony's bandwagon here with, you know, working together with multiple levels of government. You know, housing, it's a federal thing in that umbrella way, whereas when you were looking at these individual programs, it's really that municipal and provincial space. I've been involved in politics for a number of years, and I know many of the MLAs that were just elected. I know many of the councillors, and I hope, if elected, to open those communication lines between those levels of government and make sure that we have that transparency, we have communication, we have open dialogue about what's needed and how I can help as a federal member to the provincial member to the municipal member, to work for you together. Thank you.
Thank you. Anthony, what is your party's plan to make childcare a sustainable, long-term part of our economic recovery so it helps ensures families can find a high-quality space for their kids and be able to afford it?
Okay, great. Yeah, revisit the childcare question. So I mentioned before actually that I 100% can get behind the childcare plans of both the Liberal Party and the NDP, who are promising to subsidize partnerships with provinces that would work somewhat similarly, analogously to the Health Accord, where the provinces are responsible for providing the care, and then there's federal funding attached to that. The target that they've set is $10 a day end user cost, with the remainder being made up by largely a federal subsidy. In Nova Scotia, the federal to provincial funding mix, I think, is about 90-10. That seems reasonable. That seems equitable. I can get behind that. Now, in the long term, as we move past the pandemic and out into the future, I think the sort of green stance on it begins to make a little bit more sense. And I could certainly see sort of transitioning even from one into the other, where the Greens have set a long-term goal of having 1% of national GDP to be set aside in one way or another, largely through federal, but partially through provincial funding, to subsidize childcare, to ensure that, you know, all of our children are being cared for in an effective way in community settings where they can healthily develop as children. And I think having that sort of a target for spending is a great way to make it structural and to ensure that it is a long-term and meaningful investment rather than sort of a flavor of the week type of thing. Now, with that said, I don't want to throw shade on the NDP and Liberal plans. They're good plans. And again, I can absolutely get behind them. So good stuff. Thank you.
Daryl.
Thank you. Childcare is crucial. As I've said before, I was on the Minister's Advisory Committee provincially for 4 years. I actually started the first 4+ program in this province with the French School Board. We have the childcare benefit, tax-free for Canadian families. That is $5 million a month, $60 million a year in Sackville-Preston-Chezzetcook alone. Those are tax-free money. That's how crucial it is. Now bringing in childcare at 50% less next year and down to $10 is the way to go. But also creating, you can give money, but you also have to create space. So we need more spaces. We're going to create 250,000 new spaces. And you need more educators and good paying jobs for educators. That's why we're going to hire 40,000 educators on top of what is there today. Our job is to ensure that if parents want to go to work outside their home, that they have access to good childcare. And we know that good childcare will ensure that students are even more educated as they move forward. It's been our plan. We will continue. It's something I, as a former educator, strongly support and believe in. Thank you.
Thank you. Jenna.
Childcare is the smartest investment that we can make in our future, our communities, and our economy as a whole. I think it's very easy to see how much it affects the families, the parents, the children, and the communities as a whole when our parents are able to go back to work and our children are able to be in a space where they learn and they thrive. And right now, many people are frustrated because the Liberals have promised to deliver affordable childcare since before I was born. And it's a little bit late because I'm 25 now. I'm able to take care of myself, which is great. And if they were serious about childcare, they wouldn't have called an election, because as they pitched the $10 a day, the NDP and Jagmeet Singh, we were on board and we were ready to make that happen. But because this election was called, it won't happen. And so our families and the children in this community, they need access to daycare, and it needs to be affordable so that parents can do whatever they choose to do with their time, whether that be work or whether that be to leave your child with a babysitter while you go get groceries. That's an option that we would have with an NDP government.
Thank you. Angela.
So if we increase women's labor participation in the workforce, we could increase Canada's productivity by 4% in the medium term. As our Quebec example has shown, increasing childcare affordability increases the number of women who choose to work outside of the home. So as I stated before, we're planning on converting the childcare expense deduction into a refundable tax credit that covers up to 75% of the cost of childcare for the lower income families. This will increase the support that lower income families receive by thousands of dollars per year and provide more assistance to almost all families. We will enable more women to choose to participate in the workforce. Our families are tired of the promises and inaction. Our flexible and comprehensive approach will help all families right away and offer extra support to those who need it. Thank you.
And I think we have time for at least one, maybe two extra questions that I have here. So the first one, I will start at Angela and go this way. And then if we have time, and I think we will for the second, I'll start at Jenna and go this way. All right. What tools will you use to communicate to the residents of Sackville-Preston-Chezzetcook?
Period.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
What tools? Well, there's many tools out there now. One of the things that I think is really important as your member of parliament is hearing your voice. And so I would love to have regular town halls to get people together and allow the voice to be heard. I don't feel like our voice is out there in Ottawa, and I really want to know the issues of Sackville-Preston-Chezzetcook. I want to talk to the people. I want to spend time with you. I want to go to your bean dinners and your bingo halls and find out what the issues are and how I can best represent you. So that's one way. That's in-person town hall meetings. There's social media, there's email, there's phone calls. I look forward to being your member of parliament and continuing to canvass. There's 72,000 people, eligible voters in this riding. I'm sorry, I'm not going to knock on all your doors in these 5 weeks. I would love to, but I just can't. So I look forward to, over the next 4 years, getting to know each of you. And if that means I'm out knocking doors on a daily basis or a weekly basis or however that looks, I think the face-to-face is the most important piece of this job, and hearing what it is that you want me to know and represent you for. Thank you.
Thank you. Anthony.
Yeah, so many tools. So first off, I would definitely be doing town hall meetings, just like Elizabeth May and Paul Manley, Green MPs, have done regularly in their constituencies as long as they've been there, and those have gone really well. They've got really great feedback. It's been a massive success that Green MPs have always demonstrated this willingness to go out in communities to talk to people in ways that others haven't. On top of that, of course, there's electronic digital tools, social media. So I always make myself accessible via email, Twitter, Reddit, Facebook, whatever you want, whatever medium is comfortable for you, I'll meet you there. And then, of course, something that's not often mentioned is you've probably got those little postcards, but once a year from your MP. Most people don't realize that the government pays for those, that there's a certain number that MPs get to send out every so often, and they're meant to be newsletters. I find often it's easy to miss because they're largely indistinguishable from the sort of, party brochures that get sent around. But if I were your MP, I'd like to use those to, reach out to community concerns, to allow people to maybe take some space on those mailouts to talk about their community events and push things like that. I think I'd like to try to make communication very, very collaborative and open and public and transparent as possible, rather than just, an inbox where things go and disappear. Yeah.
Thank you. Daryl.
Well, thank you. I've been doing it for 6 years. I hope I've been doing a very good job, because I can tell you that whenever I was in Ottawa for 26 weeks, I spoke on the radio station in Lower Sackville and Seaside FM every week when I was in Ottawa, report from the Hill. And on March 12th, 2020, until 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, when the election was called, I spoke every week to constituents on the radio, both radio stations, telling them about some of the challenges, telling them as well we were the envy of the world and we're sticking together and supporting each other. It's been a very strong tool for me. But I also send out 5 to 6 newsletters, documents, questionnaires to our constituents. Just last month, we got about, I would say, 50 answers at the bottom on a survey. So we often survey. We've done town halls. And what we do, we outreach to the business community. We outreach to various organizations on any new program or initiative out there. And we have conversations. We invite them to come to our office. We help them fill in the forms. We will work with them. We have worked with them. I'm proud of that dedication. And when they come to Ottawa, I have never, ever refused anyone to visit my office in Ottawa, to meet with me. A constituent or a Nova Scotian, it's carte blanche. They get in, because that's what I am. I work for you. I am your representative. I will continue to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Jenna.
Yeah, so I'm not a politician. I'm a people person, and I've been serving my community for years, and that's why I'm here. It's about the people. And so I can tell you all the tools that I would love to use, and that would be great. But at the end of the day, I'm going to meet the people where they're at, and I will do what they want to do and what they're most comfortable with. So whether that be town halls like Anthony and Angela mentioned, or whether that be canvassing regularly and making sure that everyone knows who I am and sees my face as their MP, but making sure that our underrepresented communities are able to speak for themselves, because we can absolutely advocate for them in Ottawa, and I will fight for you in Ottawa, but I also will give constituents an opportunity to speak for themselves and to tell their own stories that they haven't been able to tell for so long. And listening and advocating for our community members. But also, as a young person, social media is kind of my go-to. It's how I reach a lot of other young people, especially TikTok. It's an NDP thing, it's a young people thing, and that's a great way to meet constituents. And I've met tons of supporters through social media, and I will continue to do whatever is best for them.
And the last question, officially, before the wrap-up. What is your government's plan to enhance public transportation in Sackville-Preston-Chezzetcook? Jenna.
Yeah, so many of our rural communities are being discriminated against, basically, when it comes to public transit. So places like Preston and places like Chezzetcook, these are places that aren't even Eastern Passage and a lot of like Cow Bay. People are having to spend hours out of their day to get services. And so there's lots we can do when it comes to public transportation, but there's also lots we can do when it comes to those community and public services and making sure that those are accessible and in communities as well. So making sure that mental health care is something that if I'm in Eastern Passage, I can drive down the street or I can take a bus down the street to get mental health care instead of having to go from Eastern Passage to downtown Dartmouth to make sure that my mental health is being addressed, because right now those things don't exist in our community. So making sure that all of our constituents have access to transit and are able to get to where they need to go, but still making sure that they have access to the public services that they need in their areas, in their communities.
Carol.
Thank you. You're not following that rotation, but
No,
that's
no,
okay.
no, not. This
you're-
one is starting
okay.
at Jenna.
Okay. So listen, transportation is crucial, and when I knock on doors, I'm hearing it more and more. Here in Fall River, the municipal transit bus does not come here. It comes to the top of the hill by Miller Lake. We've been working with the municipal government and the federal government. We did get East Hants, I guess you call it East Hants bus, community bus. That has helped a lot of seniors that want to, you can call ahead and get an appointment made. Still need more. We'd like to get the bus, municipal bus down to Sobeys so that students going university could have access. The same thing over in Eastern Passage, some challenges there. Over in Chezzetcook, Porter's Lake area, we've been able to get the bus riders there as well, which is big enhancements the last number of years. We need to continue, but I know our government has invested billions of dollars in transit across this country. And as I've told the mayor on a number of occasions, we need to make sure that we have access, all of HRM has access to transportation for the youth, but also for seniors and any Canadians that need to get somewhere in the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Anthony.
Yeah, so I grew up in Lawrencetown, sort of out in the other end of the district. And while many parts of Lawrencetown are actually sort of, decently sort of medium density, there is basically no transit service there whatsoever. And I'll tell you, when you're a teenager and you're, really struggling to sort of land your first job or something like that, that's a very high wall. It can, because you're trying to, get rides from people. You're riding your bicycle for 2.5 hours each way. You're doing these sorts of things. And it's really a hardship. It's easy to forget in our car-centric society that, those of us who don't have the freedom to just jump in a car and drive somewhere, that it can be a really severe restriction on someone's personal freedom to not have an easy way to get around. And while I see, successive federal governments and federal political parties making lots of noise about the importance of transit, I don't really see them putting their money where their mouth is. And I think the Green Platform really demonstrates a very serious and real commitment to actually taking some responsibility for making sure that transit is viable in rural areas by putting some money behind it, by asking the government to put its money where its mouth is and make sure that transit actually becomes accessible, because not only does it represent a huge economic freedom, but it also will help us meet our climate goals in a very cost-effective way. So it's win-win, and we need to be doing it.
Thank you. Angela.
Well, I have 3 teenagers, 2 of which started university. One's in second year, one's in first year. And I live in Beaverbank. So I know all about transit issues. And we're lucky enough to have a third vehicle that can be used to get to the bus station so my kids can get to school. But I know that's not the case for most families. So it is typically not a federal issue. However, if I'm elected, I would like to work with different levels of government and put this on our plate. How do we work to get more transit into more areas, into Sackville-Preston-Chezzetcook? Thank you.
Now it's time for the wrap-ups. So we will begin with Anthony Edmonds. Anthony, the mic is yours.
Awesome. Well, a huge thanks to you, Pat, to FRABA and NSAR for putting this together, Dagley Media, everyone else behind the cameras who made this possible. Also, very sincere thanks to my fellow candidates. It's a thankless job we've got here, and you're doing it with a smile. That's really great. So earlier tonight, I talked a little bit about the lack of collaboration between political parties. But how can this be? We have worthy candidates like these. Why are we collaborating more? Well, it's a question of incentives. The goal here for each of us is to get the most votes, not like a majority of the votes, just more than the next person. This sort of reminds me of a bad joke. There's 2 hikers. They see an angry bear. One kneels down to check her shoelaces. What are you doing? Asked the other one. You can't possibly outrun a bear. She looks up and says, well, I don't need to outrun the bear. Tough room. Okay, us candidates here, we are the hikers. Suppose that I choose to run a divisive or a dirty campaign and I lose a few votes along the way. Well, as long as the other side loses more votes than me, that's still a win for me. It's not right. Our voting system is not set up to incentivize collaboration or civility. It's set up to incentivize negative campaigning. Political parties are better off eking out a narrow majority on a third of the vote because then they just don't need to answer to the rest of us. Hence the endless cycle of snap elections, wedge issues, and policy reversals. Canada needs a vision that goes beyond the next 4 years, but no political party can really promise that until we fix this root problem. We need real democratic reform, not just talk in Ottawa. We need to demand better. Send me to Ottawa and I will demand better. Thank you.
Thank you. And Daryl.
Thank you, Pat. Well, I can tell you one thing. I've been your voice in Ottawa and not Ottawa's voice here. When the Liberal government proposed some tax initiative for the business community, I spoke up and said, I do not agree with my government. I was on television. People said, you're talking against your government. Absolutely. I am here for my people. I will defend my people because it's important to me, like my father told me a long time ago. I've been dedicated to this job. I have the experience to continue that focus, and I will continue to focus. I have brought water here in Fall River. I've helped to bring Aerotech Connector here in Fall River. $1 million over Chima Canoe Club, $1 million+ in Sackville for the Canoe Club, for Freedom Kitchen expenses. Over in the Eastern Passage, Fisherman's Cove, I've delivered millions of dollars. The wharf as well. Community centers in Porter's Lake, over in Lawrencetown, at Seafort, senior residents over in Porter's Lake as well. Lake Echo, the Canoe Club, millions of dollars. I have delivered because I have fought for this community. And I can tell you one thing, you elect me again, and you can be sure that I will continue to bring prosperity to this community because that's what it's about, people and communities. Thank you.
Angela.
So yeah, I am excited to be here. I'm excited to be in this role. I have days of what did I do? And I have days of I'm so excited, I can't wait. And the so excited they outweigh the ones where I'm thinking I might be crazy. In my current job, I tend to be the voice for the person that doesn't want to talk up. There's something going on at management level. Nobody wants to discuss it. Just tell Angela. Angela will do it. Angela's not afraid to say something. Angela's not afraid to get in trouble. I take a look at that and think, you know what? I'm really playing the politician's role in my current job. Maybe this is something I should do for a larger group of people. So I talked to my family about it because you have to have your family support to do something like this. And they all stood behind me. And I'm very proud to stand here for the Conservative government and ask for your vote to be your MP in Ottawa. Thank you.
Thank you. Jenna.
Yeah, again, thank you all to everyone who's watching. Thank you to the other candidates, and thank you to everyone who's helped organize this. I'm so excited to be here, and it's been a really great experience. I'm running for the NDP because New Democrats are different. We're working people and we answer to our communities. As I mentioned before, I'm not a politician. I'm a young Mi'kmaq woman. And the reason that I'm here is because I have had to advocate every single day of my life. Just simply existing is sometimes difficult for me. People have a problem with a young Indigenous woman succeeding, and statistically I shouldn't be here, but I am, and I'm fighting for the community members that are like me and the community members that haven't felt like their voice has been heard or that they've been left out of agreements or that decisions are being made on their behalf. And so my goal as your MP would be to listen to you, to make sure that your problems and your voices are being heard, and that I'm advocating on your behalf in Ottawa, but making sure at the end of the day that our communities get the services that they so desperately deserve, and making sure that it's more than just money. It's about who we are as community members and making sure that everyone has equal opportunity and access to the things that are important to them. So we all deserve health care. We all deserve mental health care. We all deserve safe, adequate housing, and making sure that we live in a more equitable country, because right now we don't have that. We are so segregated, and we need to come together and work together for better. So on September 20th, I hope that you will consider electing me as your MP so I can fight for you in our community.
That's good. Thank you. Thank you, candidates, for giving us your time tonight and hopefully providing residents a better understanding of what you can do for our communities. Whichever one of you win on September 20th, I look forward to communicating what you can do to the community through the Laker News. Before we end tonight, I want to be a bit serious. We've all likely seen on TV and social media the videos of the violence directed at Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and that of journalists covering his campaign stops. That is not okay. Regardless of the political stripes, politicians, their campaign staff, nor the journalists covering them do not deserve to have the violence or threats directed at them as have been over the past week or two. The way to make your voice heard is not by those violent scenes, but by using pencil or pen and paper and voting your choice who you think can lead Canada. That's how you get your message across. At the advance polls starting Friday, September 10th and going till September 13th, and on election day, September 20th, make sure to mark that X on your ballot for the candidate that you feel can do the job best. Please get out and vote. It's our privilege that we can vote. Make it count. Good night from beautiful Fall River.